Oh shit! My rig disassembled. Hi everyone, Chris here. Today I'm going to tell you my honest opinion about the MOZA R9 wheelbase after more than 1.5 years of intense usage, and I'll try to shed some light on the questions that I've had when I bought it, and we'll also have a closer look whether it has aged well so far. Saying all that, yes, I have paid for it all by myself and I don't get anything in return for this review except maybe a like and a sub from you guys in case you like the review at any point, which would be highly appreciated, of course. And right here I'd like to say sorry for my longer absence. I've had a pretty severe bike accident, but I'm fine and there's a lot of new content coming up very, very soon. Also, a big thanks to Matt Malone, since he gave his audience the chance to promote their content during one of his live streams, which has led to a lot of new subscribers to my channel.
All right. CK Simracing. So far, I'm impressed. Dude, okay. Everybody needs this pro level stuff, man. Very good production value.
And I'm really, really grateful for that. Thanks, Matt. And now let's get back to the video. As a quick specs overview, the MOZA R9 is an entry to mid-tier direct drive wheelbase with 9 Nm of peak force, as the name suggests. And speaking of peak force, this is a really important thing to remember, but we'll cover that later on in the video. So I paid around 470 euros in February 23, and right now it's available for as little as 440 euros actually. And in case anyone really cares, that's 48.8 euros per Newton meter, and that tells us exactly nothing, simply because it's not the amount of torque that you're paying for, it's the overall package and quality, which leads me to the build quality next. So I received my wheelbase in a nicely designed and well secured package, which includes everything you need to get it up and running, such as cables, bolts, and of course fancy MOZA branded stickers that can be slammed onto your rig or computer. Regarding the wheelbase itself, I mean, just look at that little brick. It's so very good looking whilst being also so small and light compared to other direct drives. MOZA states that the body is made of aviation grade aluminum, and I guess that they're not lying about that. It feels and looks as if this is kind of like an airplane black box in a very small casing, or like some other part from a spaceship. Okay, alright, I'm exaggerating. The backside of it is actually made out of plastic. No crappy plastic, feels nice, looks solid. The power on button is located on the back, and it's actually pretty small, which I have never really gotten used to, since when wearing gloves I still struggle sometimes to hit it right away, but maybe I'm just too stupid for it and this is very high level nitpicking. The included cables are also of a well-made quality, no complaints here, measuring 1.5 meters for the power cable as well as 1.8 meters for the USB cable. I'd say they're sufficiently long, but not super conveniently long. So that's 59 and 70 inches for you guys in America, or 9.64 hands to anyone else if that matters. The Powerbricks casing is actually made out of less sturdy plastic, which dents easily when pushing against it. It's not a total deal breaker, but you definitely have to be careful with it and shouldn't step on it since it might actually break when doing so. Maybe I'm totally wrong and it's super sturdy, but my perception tells me that this is where MOZA was cutting costs a little in order to offer competitive pricing. And I'd say fair enough, since this isn't going to be any moving part or anything like that. The wheelbase itself is a very compact unit without any fancy fluff except for the capital letters on the sides, but I personally like the way they did that design-wise, especially with the extruded heat sinks, which also serve the purpose of cooling the unit. The whole wheelbase feels very premium when holding it in your hands, which you won't be doing a lot, of course, since this thing is supposed to be mounted on a wheel stand or an aluminum rig, and I seriously wouldn't recommend mounting it on a table, even though it is possible to do so using MOZA's table cable clamp. I'll explain my recommendation further in the performance section of this video. It's quite heavy at 6.8 kilograms, and the shaft also delivers a confident feeling and a no flex feeling when plugging on a wheel with an NRG style quick release, since that is what MOZA uses on all of their direct drive wheelbases. And that takes me right to the feature overview. As mentioned, MOZA is using the NRG style quick release, which I think is one of the best quick release systems on the market. Switching wheels is done in a matter of a few seconds by simply pulling the metal collar on the back of your MOZA wheel or any other wheel with an NRG style quick release, and then pulling off the wheel itself. In order to put another wheel back on, you just have to pre-align the ball bearings and push the wheel against the shaft until the collar smacks back into place. You'll hear it when you've done it right, I promise. In case the ball bearings weren't aligned right from the start, you can also push the wheel against the shaft and rotate the shaft a bit until it snaps into place. But please, just make sure to leave enough room for the collar. My fingers haven't got caught in there fortunately, but I think that this might hurt seriously, so be aware of that. All of MOZA's wheels are operated wirelessly on their bases, and they also draw power from the connection on the shaft directly. So no need to charge your wheels or wrap a cable around the motor shaft here. They have a really well thought out and reliably functioning ecosystem, just like SimMagic for instance. The wheelbase always recognized and powered up my MOZA wheels instantly. And even the shaft doesn't show any signs of wear until this day. It's an absolutely reliable system. I love it. On the backside, there are sockets obviously for the power and USB connection, as well as two DIN connectors for MOZA's e-brake and the dashes they offer. So you wouldn't have to use up all your spare USB ports on your computer or on your hub, for instance. There are mounting holes on the top for mounting the dash, which I don't own, so I can't tell you more about that, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Regarding mounting options, the R9 can only be bottom mounted with 4 M6 bolts, so no side or front mounting options are possible here. I frequently check the bolts like once every 2 to 3 months or so, I don't know, and they haven't come loose at all. I have used washers so everything sits extremely tight on my rig. Once installed correctly, it's a very rigid solution. Alright, now let's get to the most important bit about this beautiful piece of hardware, the performance. The R9 was my very first direct drive wheelbase, and coming from a belt-driven Thrustmaster T300, I was absolutely blown away by the amount of detail and the sheer power that this little electric motor is capable of delivering. The wheelbase rumbles powerful when going over curbs. You can feel incredibly well when the car is transferring its weight when switching from left-handers to right-handers or when you're weaving about. The suspension of the virtual car makes the wheel bounce when going over bumps and jumps. Man, it's an absolute delight. Considering that this direct drive wheelbase is only a little above 400 euros or dollars, I'm still quite amazed about the quality of the force feedback. In case the feeling is a little too raw for your liking, or if it feels too much dampened, there are loads of adjustments you can make in the Pithouse software, which we'll talk about in the next chapter. So overall, the sensation of its force feedback is an absolutely great and highly customizable. I'm not gonna lie, it has even increased over the past 1.5 years via software updates. I personally tend to have my force feedback as raw as possible with a very subtle amount of dampening, and this is perfectly achievable in the software. The following footage shows me testing the R9 at maximum power in an LMP3 car at Le Mans in iRacing. As the wheel starts to oscillate, I can only save myself by counter-steering a little. But as you can see, 9 Newton meters is far enough to be shaken around when just trying to hold it steady in a straight line on a bumpy road.
Oh shit! My rig disassembled.
I'm not exaggerating, this little beast packs quite the punch. Having 9 Newton meters of peak force is plenty to begin with and will probably be enough for many sim racers in regards to maximum force. But you have to keep in mind that the figure 9 just means that this is going to be the absolute limit that the wheel is capable of delivering. And don't get me wrong, wrestling 9 Newton meters is quite a physically demanding task. The issue here is that the wheelbase isn't able to multitask anymore when reaching its limit. So the force feedback essentially starts to clip. To get a better understanding of what all this means, picture this. Imagine that you're going through a very fast and long corner and you crank the force feedback in-game to a very high value. Pretty much a scenario like Pouhon or Eau Rouge and Radion, I don't know, Spa, you know? In a very fast car, or like Indy cars on ovals, since these cars don't have any power steering. In scenario A, you're going through the corner just normally, maxing out the torque of the wheelbase. In scenario B, you're going through the exact same corner, maxing out the power as well, but this time you're hitting a curb while doing so. And this is where the R9 is reaching its limits when you're operating it at full power all the time. You won't be able to actually feel the curb effects because the wheelbase is already maxed out, thus not being able to deliver these effects. The signal from the in-game telemetry cannot be transmitted by the wheelbase anymore since it has reached its maximum output. And this is exactly where the 9 Newton meters may not be sufficient anymore if you desire a continuous and strong force feedback. So mostly you'll be operating the R9 at around 6 Newton meters, while the peak effects like the suspension and such will be delivered at their maximum. I'm always setting my wheelbases up at 100% force in the software and dial in my desired output in-game. But still, 9 Newton meters of peak force is a lot, and this thing is not a children's toy. You should be always aware that this is by far enough force to be injured badly. And as I've said before, it's most likely enough output for many sim racers or first-time users of a direct drive wheelbase. Of all the different software packages that come with sim racing manufacturers' products, I have to say that I'm a really big fan of the MOZA Pithouse software. It has an easy to read design and guidance system, it notifies you automatically when there is a software update available once you open it, and you can click a single button in order to auto-check and update all of your MOZA peripherals if available. Absolutely fantastic stuff. With the wireless connection, it also detects which MOZA wheel you have connected in a matter of seconds, so you can configure everything to your liking easily. Now, there are some built-in presets for the wheelbase settings, which in general resemble the provided car models fairly well. So the drift preset gives you a very light wheel with lots of maximum rotation, while the karting preset adds a lot of inertia to the turn-in and requires a lot more force to be operated. You can also make your own presets, but the catch here is that you have to save them in one of the existing preset folders like GT, Formula, and so on. It would have been great if there was an option to add individual folders or just save the presets in the main window. Also note that the profiles are stored locally on your computer in a single file. They can't be saved to the wheelbase or to a cloud, for instance. There are tons of options in here, which I'm not going to cover fully, but in general, the Pithouse software offers absolutely everything that is needed to adjust your wheelbase perfectly customized for you. There are also convenience features like how hard or soft you prefer your bump stop when the wheel is at its max rotation, and there's also a force feedback effect equalizer that gives you even more fine-tuning control over how everything feels. I personally ended up leaving the force feedback equalizer at its default settings. The only thing I'd recommend when making changes to the settings is that you always should change one single slider at a time and test it before advancing to the next one. This might actually save you a lot of headaches and time as well. The tooltips next to each setting are super useful and well explained if you don't know what they're intended to do. As I've said before, MOZA does add features over time which make the product noticeably better. Recently, they've added the option to add custom colors to the GSV2 wheels buttons, for instance, which I have actually previously complained about in my review. So to sum it up, really cool all-in-one software with so many features that you might not even need all of them, but it's nice that they're here and MOZA takes good care of it. Even though there aren't many things to criticize about the R9 wheelbase, there are a few things that may not be deal-breaking, but they are existing. First up, the wheel has some noticeable cogging when not in use. You can literally see that the motor shaft is kind of like jumping from one bearing to another. And yeah, I know that's nitpicking, and it's even the highest level of nitpicking, I know. But when it's powered up and in-game, you won't notice this cogging anymore. While driving, the force feedback feels indeed a tiny little more robotic or electronic, so to speak, when comparing it to a higher-end wheelbase, but it's not like a day and night difference as, for instance, a belt-driven wheel versus a direct drive wheel. And now for the other topic. I'm just going to be touching this one very carefully since there are so many different user experiences and discussions on Reddit and other reviews. I'm talking about heat. So yes, this very specimen here got warm when using it for more than an hour, let's say. When powering it all the way up, it even got like really warm. Still not as hot that you couldn't touch it anymore, but very noticeably warm, okay? I haven't measured it, and the fact that I didn't was that I was actually okay with how warm it felt. I've had no worries that it would catch on fire or anything like that, because, I mean, it's an electric device. The one thing that I can confirm, though, is if you put it to very high constant force feedback values, it will decrease its power output noticeably. I can't tell you exactly by how many Newton meters, but something like 25%, 20%, 15% maybe. I don't know. It's really hard to tell since it happens gradually, so you won't be going in a race and all of a sudden you're being robbed by all the force feedback you've paid for, like mid-corner or something. And to be fair, the times it happened to me, I actually noticed it like almost 5 minutes after the force feedback has been reduced. And please remember, this happened only to me when using very high torque figures in-game constantly, which has led to clipping anyways. My experience with the wheelbase was way better when I found the right values in FFB output, so it wasn't clipping anymore, and that actually had a positive impact in my driving performance. With these settings, I've never had any more torque reductions, not even when using the wheelbase for like 3 hours straight. As a verdict, who is this little brick for, and is it value for money? I think the R9 is a really great solution for people who are either very enthusiastic sim racing beginners looking for their first wheelbase, or for people who would like to transition from a belt-driven wheel like a Logitech G29, a Thrustmaster T300, or something similar to a direct drive system without breaking the bank. The amount of fun you'll get from this device is beyond measure. Having constant updates which added noticeable differences in the way the force feedback feels, and having super sturdy components that never failed anything, it's actually really hard for me not to recommend this direct drive wheelbase, especially since MOZA has a very fairly priced and extremely well working ecosystem. However, after getting used to it for a long time, 9 Newton meters of peak force wasn't enough for me personally anymore, and I'm already using a new wheelbase, so stay tuned for its review soon. I bought my R9 closely before the R12 had been announced, which was kind of a bummer since I think that 12 Newton meters is gonna be the sweet spot for many sim racers, which lets almost nothing to be desired anymore. So the R12 is probably the R9's biggest competitor since it's only 180 euros or dollars more than the R9. However, the highly praised SimMagic Alpha Mini, which has 10 Nm of peak force and according to other reviewers actually feels like it has even more power than that, is also worth having a look at since it's priced at around 650 euros here in Europe. When it was released, the R9 was mainly a direct attack on Fanatec's CSL-DD, which is also a direct contender with 8 Nm of peak force. However, the R9 is a very solid unit which sports a lot of punch and a very sturdy housing, introducing you to an excellently operating ecosystem which gets further developed and fleshed out by its developers. I still recommend this wheelbase to everyone who is looking to get its feet wet in the direct drive wheelbase market. And with all that being said, thanks to everyone for watching, and if this video was of value to you, please consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content in the future. Bye, and until next time, cheers.